I'm very drawn to those singing bowls, and um, so I was picking them up, and there was an elderly man. I guess he wasn't much older than me, now that I think about it. And he said, "Oh, that one's from Nepal." And I'd pick up another one, and that one's from, and I could feel, because I was very focused on one thing. My mind was quiet. And I noticed that when he said where it was from, that I noticed that what kind of feeling that gave me. Like I really wanted to buy the one from Nepal because it was from Nepal, but it didn't have a sound that was the most resonant to me. And sound affects me very much. And so when the sound rang, it hit me in a different area of my brain and body. Like the vibration really gave me each one gave me a different feeling. So I was going by feeling to look at to choose one, and I picked up a larger one that was from Vietnam, and I started to play it, and it had no crackling. You know how when you do it so smoothly, it crackles. When you don't do it smoothly, it crackles. So I was spinning it, and it was resonating, because he was about to explain to me, and he was like, "Oh, she knows how to do it." And you just sat back in the chair, and people, and it went right through that center of my brain. At the height of my temples, I felt it through and there was nothing. There was no words going across the screen, and the feeling expanded. The amount of data vibrationally, because I wasn't aware of anything. Well, I was aware, but it took it was like a movie. It took a background. The images and the people that were gathering around were kind of faded to the background, and it was just the feeling of this sound in me. And I just kept doing it, and he was happy because people were coming and they bought singing bowls because they saw me doing it. And I guess people don't know. They see the mallet and they see the thing and they go, "What do you do with that?" And it doesn't really have any interest unless you know what it is and how it works. But it was the same thing. It was very easy for me to be in a feeling place and in a no words place, and the sound, just that one sound, everything quieted. It was a noisy place, but it was the opposite of Gina in that aspect, but it was the same as what you're talking about because of this one vibration that resonated. I noticed that there were no words going across, and how the rest of the circumstance became only background data. So it was a similar experience in a different atmosphere.
Yeah. And then, I mean, ultimately, we're looking to create that under our own circumstances, of course, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with experiencing this in other, other opportunities, other circumstances. And then I think what we've learned to do, though, is that when that happens, we can kind of sink into it. We can kind of, oh, we won't miss this opportunity to like, oh, this feels different than when words are constantly going across the screen. Hi, Lisa. Thanks for hanging out. So, and then, so if you get the opportunity, so I think you will get the opportunity, but just notice the physiological result from the psychological result. So the psychological result, or in the result of the circumstances that you're in this case, is a psychological result of the words are no longer going across the screen of your mind for a little bit. The physiological result is that this area literally feels like, it's
feels
had
lit
its
up.
moment.
Feels lit.
Oh,
feels
that's a
lit
good
up.
word. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. It feels open. It feels relaxed. It feels like it's like, this is my brain. It's still exactly where it was a moment ago, but somehow it feels like there's more space in my skull, And now, so I've taken this a step further to that feeling of a mind that is relaxed can become a new point of attention. And what happens when we place our attention on something? It gets bigger, it grows, There's a little bit more depth for every second that it exists in that way. And so now we're creating even more space. We're allowing that process to occur at will. And then that thing that we call emotional memory. Have I ever really explained emotional memory? Do we need to, do we know?
Well, it might be worthwhile. I don't
Okay.
recall you
You
explaining
can
it.
definitely
Okay.
talk about it again, but you did touch on it. You felt that it was time that you could. So yes, you did, but there
don't
weren't a lot of
remember.
there weren't a lot of people here.
Okay. So this is going with a psychological, I don't want to, it's a fact. Like this is in psychology. So this is in textbooks, and it's been in textbooks for years, but we have this thing that we call state memory. So state memory is the state that you process the memory in is going to be the state that you will be most likely able to recall it. So for example, if
It's
space,
deliberately modulating, isn't it?
I
I feel like I have been able to deliberately modulate the space that we just talked about, that Jean talked
Yeah.
about on much more easily. It's not the first time I've felt it, but it was more like a brush of something before, and
Sure.
now it is a touchstone kind of place.
So you're taking the emotional memory and you're creating deliberate modulation. One can exist without the other. So you can have emotional memory occur, but it's not necessarily deliberate modulation. Deliberate modulation will always be related to emotional memory, though. You see what I mean? Does that make sense? And I can explain that in a second too. But so if all of a sudden, while Gene was sitting there, space junk fell from the sky and came, soaring down and just like blew up, and then a little dinosaur came out and started talking to him, his heart's going to start beating faster. His entire energetic state is going to change. And then 15 minutes later, after the experience, like you would think you should be able to remember all of those details. Like you've never seen a dinosaur before, you've never seen space junk, you've never seen an explosion. When he comes out of the response, the energy response, the electrochemical, physiological, hormonal response that he was just in, he won't be able to as easily remember. He'll be like, oh, what? And so Donna's will like, what color was the dinosaur? And Gene will be like, it was, well, damn, like it was right in front of me, but I can't. Well, what color was the spaceship? It was, was there any writing on it? Which direction did it fall from? I don't. So, but the idea is that if for some reason Gene got back into that state where his energy was moving quicker and everything else, he would start to recall some of those details of the spaceship and what color the dinosaur was that came out of it. Does that make sense? We see this a lot like in police work. There's something that somebody has never expected to see. It throws them into a different energetic, physical state of being. And then, 5 or 10 minutes later, they have nothing really to give to the police. They don't remember what the suspect looked like. They don't know which way he ran, but they were right there. They were looking at it. They absorbed it all. Now,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It could be an adrenaline rush that
Oh, yeah.
interferes with the memory.
Well, if we give you another adrenaline rush, though, the memory will be able to recall, right? So there are psychologists who I would never, ever think of doing such a thing, but they would try to get you into a state to recall trauma. So they try to get you into a different state to help you recall a different thing. Maybe there's a reason to, maybe they're trying to save someone's life or something like that. And I mean, I think in a typical setting, that's not ideal to try to bring up old traumas by creating something traumatic now. But it's not just trauma that this works in. So this entire dynamic works in another way as well. Times that you're more peaceful, times that you're more relaxed. All the memories and everything that you process then will be more easily recalled at another time when you're more relaxed and more peaceful. So here's something I noticed. When I was more relaxed, when I'm more peaceful, I start to get the emotional memory of when I processed memories as a child. Because when I was younger, and I say child, 10, 12, 13, 14 years old, I'm free, I'm running, I'm on my bicycle, I'm not thinking about a bunch of shit. There's nothing really to think about. I'm just riding my bike and looking at stuff and playing, and I'm having fun, right? So nowadays, I create space. My mind is very relaxed. The sun is shining on my skin. I'm in a big city. I used to love buildings and stuff like that. I was in a smaller town, but it still had like the little town square. And I would go on top of the buildings and everything and pretend it was a big city. So the memories, and when I say memory, I do mean normal memory, but I also mean the emotional aspect of that memory starts to come up. And I'm like, this feeling of freedom and of lightness and of play, I can more easily access that feeling because when I process that feeling, I'm now in a similar state. Does that make sense? So we're working with state memory, but not in a traumatic way. Like it's in the opposite. It's in the peaceful way. Does that make sense?
So state memory is a known thing. It's studied,
It's a
or
known
you
thing.
just discovered it.
No, I'll send you a link. Yeah, no, state memory is a known thing.
Oh, well, I'm not familiar with that at all.
Yeah, no, I have it. I have a free psychology website that I can send you a link to. But yeah, no, state memory is a studied thing because, well, they want to understand why after, 5 minutes after an accident, you looked right at the person. Why can't you remember? So they did start to do research on the energetic physiological state that you're in, that you process the memory. That's the key. The state that you process the memory will be the state that you can more easily recall that memory. That's why this is true, but I had a teacher, it was a psychology teacher in college, who said if you consume cannabis while you study, consume cannabis right before you take the test, because you're going to get into a similar state and you'll be able to recall. And I'm like, hey, I like this teacher. He's speaking my language. But does that make sense? So emotional memory is directly tied to what psychology or psychologists would call state memory. But we're actually working with it. So we're not just looking at this phenomenon saying, that's interesting. We're actually able to recreate these different states. And then that would be what Donna was talking about with deliberate modulation, deliberately intending a state of being based on a state of being that you recall through memory.
I
Does that
feel
make sense?
pretty fortunate to be in this environment. And I did my Tai Chi Qigong right by the lake. And my mind was pretty much just feeling what I was doing. And it's very simple for me to create that feeling here because the environment was designed for it. I mean, there is nothing, let me say that, there is nothing to distract you. There is only things to see and experience, but nothing grabs your attention because it's deliberate or it's loud or it's interfering. It just is. It's just the way it is. So to do Tai Chi in the middle of it, I found that not for the whole exercise, but for large parts of it, I just felt like I was part of the environment, and there was nothing else going on, just that. And so I feel fortunate in that I'll do this a couple more days. I'm hoping I'll be able to bring it with me. We'll see.
And that's the key. That is the both the tricky part and it is the key. But I think you'll notice the more that you create a similar gene condition, that you're in right now, you'll be able to recall not just the memory. Of course, the memory is interesting and you're like, aha, but the feeling associated with that memory, the feeling of what it's like to be there. And I'm sure the feeling right now you have felt before. If you kind of look back at other times that you were in similar circumstances, you may have felt those feelings before. And the more that we experience it through our practice, the feeling of peace. What does it feel like when the words stop running across the screen? The more we feel it, the more we have that touchstone of how it feels, the more we can start to deliberately intend it at will. And I don't really consider that changing. So let's say that Donna feels terrible. I wouldn't recommend deliberately modulating to not terrible. That's not what I'm talking about. Donna doesn't need to deliberately modulate to not terrible. She just needs to go back to her points of attention, make sure that the thoughts aren't driving it worse, and eventually she'll recalibrate back to center on its own. She doesn't really need to do anything for that. So
I can find it like in a second now.
and
And
that's
I
awesome
did
too,
the
yeah.
opposite. I have the opposite feeling that Jean had. I was so arrogant about it. When I felt it, I was like, oh, I know this place. I know this place. But man, I know this on a level now. That is next level. I elongated it for as long as I possibly could. As a matter of fact, the person that I was with had, like we weren't, adjacent to each other all the time, going from table to table. We split up a little bit, just stayed in each other's, a certain distance apart as we were moving through this place. And apparently he saw what was happening and recognized it as something and took a picture and sent it to me. And I had no idea because my phone, I was in my backpack and I wasn't paying any attention to my phone at all. And I was so sure that this place was going to be so easily accessible to me that I didn't buy the singing bowl that was the catalyst for the experience. I mean, I'm thinking about, I probably should have bought that because it was so, but I knew that it was going to stay with me and it was an accessible place because I didn't feel the need to buy the singing bowl to make it happen. It was a place that I understood, and I felt so sure that I could deliberately modulate to it or get to that state, that emotional state that you're speaking about, to be able to recreate it, that it would become a point of attention. It'll be when I write it down, which I didn't, it will be, the singing bowl state or some such thing.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So I don't know, we talked about emotional memory. That does lead a little bit into the discussion of deliberate modulation, which has been a part of this thing we've been doing, the system we've been doing since the very beginning. So the sensing energy, the deliberate modulation is all a part of everything that we've been doing. So, but there is a common error, and Donna kind of talked about that, touched on it a little bit. And the common error occurs when a person isn't embodying the practice. The common error becomes the circumstances are required to recreate the feeling or what we're experiencing. And then before you know it, people are chasing. Now, if you want to live, and this is different, if you want to live by the beach, live by the beach. If you move to the beach because you think that it's going to create something, it might for a while, a month, 2 months. If the mind isn't where it needs to be, it won't take long. So let's say Gene is there for 6 months where he's at right now. I would almost promise that at month 4 and month 5, it's going to start to lose a little bit of its natural pulling on his peace strings. Thoughts will start to come back, because the mind will actually start to get used to the environment. Maybe if he's not embodying, that's what I mean. So if Gene isn't really doing his practice, he's now relying on the external circumstances to achieve the result. That looks like yoga class. I need to do my yoga class so that I achieve this result. I need to collaborate with this drug so that I can achieve this result. I need to, do these things so that I can get these results. But if you have the mindfulness, if you have the embodiment practice, that's not necessarily the case. You can live by the beach and you can experience the essence of the beach every single day because you're refreshing it. It is always new, but the mind has to be very present and very relaxed to notice the subtleties, and sometimes not so subtleties, of the differences of every single moment as it moves. So if a person isn't embodying this practice, they may start to look towards retreats and all of these things to facilitate the feeling and the state of being that they desire. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead.
I absolutely understand that. And Lisa just typed in something that I was going to say. I felt there are circumstances in my moving in that have slowed the process of me putting my house together. Still, I mean, I moved here in May and it's still an issue. So yesterday I noticed that I was practicing less, and that because I was focused on problems that needed solutions, And I was giving them way too much thought. I feel jagged edges. I don't know how else to describe it. It's a bumpy path. I'm not practicing, and I'm feeling the result of that. And I don't like the way that feels. It's not a place that I want to be in, and I know what I need to do to get out of it, and I need to smooth the edges. So I chose to just stop doing everything, get out of this environment, and go walk on the beach, because it's an easy grab for me. It's the lowest hanging fruit. It's the path of least resistance, whatever. And as I was walking, I noticed that it was clouds were rolling in, and I was like, I wonder if I can get a good walk in before it rains. And then I was walking on the beach, and I was walking on the boardwalk, and I realized a lot of the momentum of the thoughts were, I carried them to the beach. So the beach doesn't have any particular, and when I realized it, I looked around, and the sky was just magnificent. And there were, I was looking into the marsh, and, a lot of the things that Jean's talking about, the environment, and I could do that anywhere, but I enjoy doing that on the beach, and it's an easy access for me. And yet I wasn't noticing it. I was walking the beach without doing anything with my mind. And so I wasn't feeling any of the effects of the beach. So I decided to step off the boardwalk and walk. There's a lot of shells from high tide and low tide, and look for beach glass. And I ended up bumping into, coming close to someone, and we struck up a conversation. She ended up being from the hometown Massapequa that I'm from, and we started a conversation, and it was lovely. And we exchanged phone numbers, and while I was speaking to her, I made an effort to be practicing and not just be distracted. And while we were speaking, it was a very engaging conversation. It was so unusual to meet somebody from my hometown in another state. Not that unusual. I mean, it's one state over, but still. Oh, and she lived on Toronto Avenue, which is where Eugene's wife lived, which is around the corner from us. And I'm like, how do we not know each other? Like, it was so crazy. So we were talking, but I was practicing, and out of the corner of my eye, I literally just looked for a second, because she was like, I've been out here 2 hours, and I only found one piece of beach glass. And I looked, and I never find them, because I'm rarely looking at the ground. And I turned my eyeballs to the right, and underneath a pile of shells, all in the same monochromatic colors, I could see a little bit of green, and I picked it up, and it was a really neat bottlehead piece of beach glass. And she's like, holy shit, how'd you see that, like, in the middle of a sentence? And I said, well, I could explain, but it would take too long. And then she said, well, here, take mine. And she gave me hers, and she said, it was lovely to meet you, and we'll see each other again. I'll call you when we're going to go out, or whatever we agreed to. And so when I was holding the beach glass for the rest of my walk, and of course I was now practicing, I had points of attention, felt my forehead be relaxed. I feel that space from my temples and between my temples. And I thought about the beach glass and how it is, because I found several pieces of glass prior to that, but they still had jagged edges. The beaches, the characteristic of the beach glass is that the beach, the process of being on the beach had smoothed the edges. And I thought that was a perfect metaphor for what had just happened to me, that I had these jagged edges, and it was still a piece of glass. It's just that the edges were smoothed as a result of my practice. So
Nice.
that was a neat experience.
That was a good analogy. I'm gonna get a real quick cup of coffee. Shayna is busy, so she can't fill mine up. But
so yeah, Lisa had put in the comments that or not walk on the beach at all, and I have forgotten to walk the beach. But you could go I'm just filling in while you're going to get coffee.
Okay.
Ernest.
Okay. I
I'm
don't know. I
not
just
saying
wanted to make
anything.
sure.
I'm not saying anything profound.
Okay. I'll be right back. Give me
I'm
a sec.
just adding to what Lisa said, which was, yeah, there were plenty of times that I chose to live. My options here were live a walk to town or a walk to the beach, because I just wanted things to be accessible to me by walking. And yeah, walk to the beach is something that I forgot to do, even though it really helps me get back to my practice easily. It's like Gene being where he is. It just does that for me.
Mhm.
It helps me. I maximize the feeling that I get at the beach more easily. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Like I love walking along the lake. You know, there's a reason. I love the feeling of the architecture in the city. So there's plenty of touchstones for these types of things, and there's nothing like Gene being in that environment. There's nothing wrong with utilizing what's there. I mean,
Not
it just
cheating.
makes sense. No, it's not cheating at all. No. Now, if you start to rely on it, that's a common error. I still wouldn't say it's cheating per se, but it's not going to have the effect, the overall effect that we're looking for. You know, and actually it can get quite contraindicating to a certain extent, because now people start chasing these things. They start counting the days until their vacation or until their weekend, and then before you know it,
Or until retirement.
until retirement. And I do remember I have some stories about folks who were retired, and then they moved to Florida, and then they don't go to the beach. They don't do these things unless visitors come. And then it's like, oh, let me show my area off and show all of the things that we have available to us that we never do. And it's like, I don't, it's, you know, so experiencing that and seeing that, I kind of put two and two together, and I realized that the newness does start to wear off if you're not embodying this type of practice. There may be other ways. I don't know. This isn't the only way to do things, but with this practice, Gene could go out there every single day for the next 6 months, and it will continue to be renewed. There'll be something different. There'll be something new to notice. What are we looking at, Gene? A bird feeder?
It's just the lake.
Oh, I love the lake.
It's his view that he's looking at while we're talking.
On many homes, there are leaders and
In
gutters.
the chat
to,
there, why are we collecting glass?
uh,
Oh, sorry, Gene, you don't get it. Well, you know, if you get colored glass like pale blues and greens, and you hold them up to the light, and they're all smoothed by the years of rolling about in the sand, it's a bit like the feeling of having a power object or a rock that's a million years old. But you know, when you find one, it's a bit like finding a gemstone. That's the way I feel about
Oh,
it.
beach glass collecting is huge here. I mean, it's huge for many people, but making art out of the beach glass and making actually the guy that I went with is he's in the union for metal, I don't know, sheet metal bending, I don't know what the hell, but he makes those
Metal
leaders and
bending.
gutters, Gene, that you're talking about. His last job, he likes when it's really creative. So his last job was at Yale University, and they have all the copper leaders and gutters on the slate roofs, and they have odd shaped turrets and stuff like that, and he has to figure out the angles of the metal and how to put it together and how to weld it, and you know, stuff like that, which I find fascinating. But yeah, beach glass it's not big. Where beach glass collecting isn't big where you are, Ida. It's a big deal here. People are like covet their beach glass.
What I was showing was in most homes that I've seen, there are leaders that catch the water or gutters, whatever they are, and then a downspout. Well, I've never seen this before. The leader extends beyond the house, and the water just shoots out. It doesn't drain into anything. It just flies out. Just flies out the end. I've never seen anything like it. And so
I guess when you're in the country.
It just amused me that there's a lot of ways to get things done. You know, you don't have to direct the water with a tube. You can just let it flow. And I never thought of that.
Hmm.
Anyway. I mean, I guess it's not that interesting, but I found it.
It's pretty interesting. Yeah. Okay, so what did we talk about so far? We talked about emotional memory, state memory, a little bit of deliberate modulation. What's next, Donna?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Well, we could talk about a technique. So I have once again, but it's for a reason. I promise it's for a reason. But I've taken the bridge system and I put it into this Tai Chi system, essentially. So Tai Chi is the way that I deliver it, and the way that I'll be delivering it to this group as well is mind, body, and spirit. Tai Chi mind. That's the 3 pillars. That's everything that we're doing with taking our practice with us, because everything can be related back to Tai Chi. The golden line, that's very Tai Chi-esque. Proprioception, spatial awareness, that's all very Tai Chi-esque. Everything is, because I practice Tai Chi. So it shouldn't be a huge surprise that a lot of my techniques are all related back to that. Now, Tai Chi body, that's what Donna's been asking for. That is the more physical aspect of things. We'll do some regular movement. I'm looking at space, and my internet issue is resolved. So as you probably noticed, I haven't had any disruptions so far. So we'll be able to kind of move forward with a little, because it just wouldn't work if I'm sitting here doing movement and I froze for the last 10 minutes. And then you guys are like, well, Ernest, that was an amazing standing still, like that. No, I was moving. So now that the internet is working, now we can kind of start to move forward with that. Tai Chi spirit, as you can imagine, isn't something that I would want to talk about right away. I will to a certain extent, but spirit is hydrostasy. Hydrostasy is Tai Chi spirit. It's the same thing. So we've actually touched on a little bit of that today, that feeling that you get when there's not words running across the screen. Being able to tap into that feeling and create that feeling, and then really, dig into it, or really collaborate and dance with that feeling. That's everything I mean with hydrostasy, because we're not, now maybe we did use technique to get there. Once we're there, now we start to just engage the feeling. Does that make sense? So the spirit part of the practice is focusing on the feeling that we're getting from some of these things that we're doing. So a technique that I would recommend is a very Tai Chi-esque technique, and it relates directly to yin and yang. So I've been doing this for a long time, but I don't think I've ever shared it in, a neat type of format. But when I look at shadows, I can't help but notice that there's also light casting to create that shadow. And then there's my opposites, in a manner of speaking, opposites. They don't have to be exact opposites. When I pay attention to my whole body, plus my body in space and time with that expanded bubble, I call it the bubble of perception, that's the yin and the yang. I have the little Ernest and then the expanded Ernest at the same time, if that makes sense. When I look at the sky, I balance that with also, well, I guess it's more I look at the ground level of things, and then I choose to balance that with the sky. So it's a balancing with our attention as we go throughout the day. If we notice something, we can also notice its contextual opposite. Does that make sense? And they're everywhere, literally everywhere. So this is a great way to be doing a technique that is deliberate, that is intended. Your attention is going where you want it to go, but you can also play with the opposites of everything that you see in your environment, because they're all there. Does that make sense? So that's another technique that we can use and we can take with us, and I think is a very valid technique that kind of builds on other smaller techniques, but yin and yang mind. Yes,
It
Gene.
requires imagination, though, in order to see an event or something or a thing, and then imagine or create in your own mind its opposite, the yin and yang, to find the yin and yang. They're not, to me, they're not always obvious.
No, they're not always.
They're not obvious. Right.
Not always obvious. That's true. And hey, if you have to use a little imagination, use it. You were given imagination for a reason. Well, that's a terrible way to say it. Let me retract that sentence completely. You have imagination, so you might as well do something with it, right? And in one of my books, I actually take what I consider the results of the evolution of the human mind, such as imagination, such as humor, things like this. And I anthropomorphize them, of course, into people that I can talk to, but it is important. We have these aspects of the human experience in the human mind. And for a lot of people, for myself, for a very long time, I didn't utilize them. You know, I didn't understand the value that they have in the human experience in terms of our continuous and continued evolution. Imagine, Gene, if everybody just stops using their imagination, we won't be a very creative society. You know, we won't be able to do some of the things that we can do now. But imagine if we were able to really embrace our imagination. Well, now we're really getting into something to where we're really able to be infinitely more creative and infinitely more adaptable, because we're using this powerful thing that our mind can do, which is imagine something that isn't there, you know. And
And
then, of course,
Ernest, don't
yes.
you find it gets easier to use your imagination? In the beginning, when we were doing the warrior training and there was imagination techniques, I was thinking, I haven't got any. I don't have an imagination. Where did it go? Because it wasn't used. And that seems really strange to be. What has happened artistically for me is with using the imagination, then you get your own unique ideas, where before I was probably just copying stuff that I've seen or like the look of or tried to make realistic, where now it's like muscle memory, isn't it? Imagination, I find it gets better. It expands, of course, as you focus on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that this is going to get back to principle. So the things that you practice are the things that you're going to get better at. And then when you get better, and putting that in air quotes, it becomes easier for you. It becomes more accessible. That's what I mean by better. So yeah, in the beginning, if a person isn't used to using their imagination, it's going to feel a bit tricky, you know, because what has happened? The ability, I don't know if imagination itself is a skill, but imagination is an ability that we have that can go into atrophy if we don't use it. And before you know it, it's like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I don't know how to, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? This makes no sense. But once a person starts to do it, they can start to see the value. And then it does, like you said, Ida, it becomes easier and easier and easier. And before you know it, imagination is something that can be very valuable to you.
Yeah, I find it becomes much easier when there's space, when you have space available.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
When you're cluttered, the imagination gets dampened. But if you're clear and uncluttered, it's much easier.
I would say so. Here's an example. When I would walk, and I would walk to Smokey's house, and that was about a 3.5 mile walk there. So I was walking, that's what, 7 miles back and forth. And just like at Chen Chen, there's times after your shift where you're like, I don't want to walk home, but I don't know how else I'm going to get home, so I might as well just get to walking. And there's a little bit of resistance there, isn't there? You know, you don't really want to walk home. You're tired. You don't want to do it. It's going to be much harder to enjoy that walk, isn't it? Well, what I would do is I would add an imagination layer that was, imagine turning your entire environment and superimposing that with color and light and just things that make no sense, but you're still imagining it. So it was actually also a way for me to calm my mind, focus on the walk, and I would use like an all-encompassing imaginary technique. So rather than imagining something that just wasn't there, I would take everything that was there and I would add an imagination layer to it. So yeah, you know, Ida painted the dragon that I used to imagine that would change color, because that would remind me that right now you're a little anxious and that's the color of this dragon and we want it to be green and relaxed and happy. And so I would use that as a technique for myself. Now, I don't do that as much anymore. I'm not trying to change how I feel. You know, I've learned a lot since then, but it was still a valuable technique for me at the time. So when I'm walking home, I would superimpose. So Superimposed imagination is a little bit different than imagining something that's not there. And then there's the technique of imagination that I very rarely do throughout the day, and that's imagining scenarios, removing yourself from the moment completely to create an imaginary scene. I do that in the morning when I wake up to imagine my society that doesn't have the psychological suffering, but that can get out of balance very quickly. So I make sure that I don't do that all day. Superimposing the imagination, however, feels like I'm accessing a dimension of my brain power that is always accessible and available to me, but I'm just not utilizing, or I wasn't utilizing on a regular basis. So to put that in perspective, I believe that using imagination in a certain way can help create space. And if there is space, accessing imagination is typically a little easier and can help elongate the space. So true to what Jean said, but also there are ways to collaborate with imagination that can help also create space. Why? Where is our attention? Our attention when we're imagining and I would just, the whole moment, everything that I'm looking at lights up with some sort of imaginative color, or I'll add something to it. It's hard to explain. If I were a painter like Ida, I could paint the vision in my mind, but I'm falling a little bit short with the words, but I'm superimposing an entire imaginative lens over the moment. Well, what does that require? It requires my focus, it requires my attention, it requires my imagination, and that will take some of the energy away from the habitual stream of words going through my mind, like that screen. But if I find that I'm already relaxed, if I find that I'm in one of those situations, maybe I've been doing techniques all day and now my mind is super relaxed, well, now I can just imagine what I want to, when I want to, how I want to, and it is actually super accessible. So that's true to Jean's statement, but also imagination can be a valid trick of attention. And the way that I present material, the way that I present things, imagination becomes a way to access the unseen dimension of the human experience. Imagining the energy around your body can be a profound trick of attention. Imagining the Shen rising and the halo. Jean, you have electromagnetic energy around your brain, around your heart. Your heart is beating. So it's pulsing, it's creating an electromagnetic field. Whether you see it or not, that's there. I would imagine that. I would imagine this electromagnetic energy. Now, here's the thing. Remember last week we talked about attention is interacting with its environment. We know that. When attention is turned in on itself, on the brain, and we're just thinking, we're interacting with our brain. And I believe that that is contraindicative. I think that if we're focusing on certain areas of our brain unconsciously and habitually for decades and decades, I believe that causes all kinds of issues in the human brain physically. Physical abnormalities, I believe, can occur from focusing on thought to the nth degree, because the attention isn't interacting with the environment much anymore, is it? It's interacting because it's turned in on its own stream of thought. I mean, you got a little trickle, you're not walking into walls, you're using your muscle memory and your long-term memory and you're getting to your destination, but it's not really receiving the degree of attention that we talk about with this practice. So the light of attention is now, we can take that
But
same.
that's like huge momentum. That
Okay.
creates huge momentum, and why
Oh, it
it's
does.
like, and people, when like even Jean, like in the beginning of this practice, thinking, oh, it's gonna take me another 70 years to get the momentum released. Then it builds a lot of momentum to be focused on your thoughts.
It does.
And it feels like my thoughts are thinking me, like
Yes.
I'm not thinking my thoughts, and how to break free of that seems impossible.
Yeah, and that starts to get into what Eckhart Tolle talks about with the pain bodies and the things that we create because of the identification with thought. Before you know it, if somebody is in this habitual thing for long enough, they start to identify with their thought, they start to identify with the beliefs, and before you know it, they don't change their beliefs, they're not open to new ideas, they're not critical thinkers. It's just, this is the way it is, this is the way it is for 60 years, and this is the way it must be forever.
Oh,
And it's
this
like,
brings up a question that I've been wanting to ask you. Did you want to finish your point? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just that the last little bit of that is that since we know that our attention is interacting with the environment, imagination is also. Imagination isn't just not there, not real. Now, it's a different kind of real, is it a dragon? No, but something is occurring. And I do believe that there will come a time where we could potentially project our imagination and we could actually sense and receive and be able to determine what they were imagining. I think that technology actually could be pretty close to that pretty soon, to where we can actually see that the human mind is interacting with its environment. So imagination is not this mouse. That's a different kind of thing, right? But to say that imagination isn't real, I think is a fallacy. That was my point. That's why I went to the attention is interacting with the environment, and imagination is attention. It is interacting with the environment. So, it's just different. It's not the same kind of solid matter that we're used to. But to say that
Like a hologram.
it's kind of like a hologram, sure. But to say that it's not real, it doesn't exist, it has no value, is wildly erroneous. It is actually, that's just completely false. Okay, and I don't have any data to support that, Gene, but I think it's coming.
No, I understand what you're saying, and it is real. It's certainly real to the person who's creating the imagination. It's definitely real there.
Yeah.
Minimally, it's real there.
Minimally, it's real there, but yeah, I also believe that it is interacting. We're doing something. We're projecting energy into our environment. Yeah. And I think it can be very powerful. Imagine if everybody imagined the same world peace that I do in the morning. And we know that imagination is tied to creation. So the more that and there's a reason Einstein said that imagination is more important than knowledge, because you can imagine things and arrive at the knowledge. I can give you the knowledge and you may never necessarily take that into more imagination. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I remember an event happening on the college campus. I was walking around with a donor, potential donor.
Yeah.
And I was imagining a technology building built over here in this space. And I was imagining these buildings connected to the Fine Arts Center. And I was imagining all that. And I was imagining so much that I looked at the potential donor and I realized I might be losing this guy. I've got to get back to earth again. And I said, well, pardon for all my imagination. And he said, oh, no, first you imagine it, then it happens. So you have to imagine it first if it's ever going to happen.
Right.
And
That's a vision.
That's a vision.
Yeah, that's the vision, right?
Yep. All right, cool. Yeah, that's the only point I wanted to make, is just that the imagination isn't this unreal, unvaluable thing. No, it's real. It's interacting with our environment, at least on a vibrational energy type of level that we can't quite see or feel right now. But then the imagination leads to the physical manifestation. In this practice, though, that's maybe even a little bit more valuable, the imagination can lead to a feeling. And that feeling can become that hydrostasy spirit touchstone that now, so basically Tai Chi spirit and the idea of hydrostasy is, now that we're getting really good at our techniques, we're starting to create space. What do we do with it? Well, now we engage these feelings and we start to deliberately modulate. And then we get into the act of allowing, and then we really start sensing energy. And then it's a done deal from there. Any questions about that before we go to Donna's question?
Well, I just want to make an observation that yes, early even before, when I was talking to Jean about possibly coming to class, that was the sticking point. And it was the sticking point in the beginning of the practice, is that I can go to my imagination very easily. However, I did, like Jean, see it as a place that was the opposite of being in reality. He was talking about when he was walking with the donor and saying, you know, I imagine this to be here, and he was visioning, and it was connected to reality. There's a connection. It's just an expansion of it, and it's a place where my mind can go, but his mind could go there for good reason. He had a lot of momentum and facts and information and ideas. And now we're getting into the woo-woo idea, but the idea comes from, it's in a continuum of your reality. That's how invention and innovation happens. And so it doesn't matter if it's a dragon or a fairy, or it's closer to your experiential reality as a vision of a building. It's all the same thing. You do have to go there in your mind, and you have to feel what it feels like, and then you just soften the edges of the mechanics of it. You can go much further with the idea and the vision, and then the way to it becomes more apparent and easier. You find it. You find the way to make it happen after you imagine it, not before. I mean, you can get there either way, but you'll have to live a lot more years to get there without the vision and the imagination. So it's hard to break that idea of, yes, I've thought this way for so long. I've thought logically for so long. Like he even said, let me get out of this imagination place that I was enjoying so much sharing with you, and talk, let me look at this guy and see if he's with me on this, because he can just think I'm a nut, you know, imagining dragons. And I found that in the beginning, I used my imagination a lot, so it was easily accessible to me. I preferred it, actually. It was a much more relaxed, it was softened the edges, like the beach glass for me of my life, being in that place. But then when real life happened, I had to let go of my imagination, because I had to get in there to solve problems, or I had to call my brothers and ask them to do it, because it's just too much work. And I don't like being in that place so much. But now there's not a separation of the two in my mind. They're just different places that I choose to focus my attention. And some are, some I choose more poignantly than others at any given time. But I exist within both of them much more fluidly, and much more often in each place, and sometimes simultaneously, than I thought, than I reasoned was the way that my brain worked before this practice. Before this practice, I thought I was in one place or the other, and I have to drop one to be in the other. And I had opinions about which one I liked better than the other.
Sure.
As well.
Yeah. I mean, but here we are. So we know that imagination can be a part of everything that we're doing if we want it to be, if we choose.
It sure can, because never in my wildest dreams did I think my oldest brother and I would be in a class like this at the same time, because, you know, I'm the woo-woo kooky one and he's the logical get it done one. And you know, we have that lane in the family and in life pretty much. And so the fact that we can talk about both those things in this place is pretty cool.
It is, yeah. And I think with my type of mind, I can really bring those together for the group, because, you know, they're both valuable. I think one of the things I realized, though, is like, and I did it through a vision, and I don't want to spoil the vision because it's going to be in a book, but ultimately we talk about like all and woo-woo esoteric things, and it's like we want to fly, we want to go to Alpha Centauri, we want to, you know, do all of these mystical things. And I'm like, well, cool, I'm not taking away from any of that. That sounds nice, but what am I going to do if my mind isn't balanced? What am I going to do if I don't have peace first? And so my new motto from a certain point became peace first, Ernest. Focus on that. Let everything else come naturally, and it will come to you, and you don't have to try to do these things. Just relax the mind, allow the energy and the space to start to flow on its own. And then now if you end up in Alpha Centauri, you know, for some reason, hey, I'm here, I'm peaceful, I'm ready to receive and listen, and I'm not going to try to kill you and dominate you, and you know, the things that the typical human mind would start to think about. Well, how can I manipulate this and control this? And no, I'm here, I'm peaceful, and I'm probably going to be able to communicate with the Centurions, you know, a little bit more, because I'm a more functional human being in that example. So while I don't take away from woo woo, I like it. I think it's cool. You know, it's all kinds of stuff to think about and imagine. It doesn't mean a hill of beans if I don't have peace first. And none of it adds up to anything if I don't have peace first, because that stuff isn't just going to give me peace. It's not just going to give me a balanced and powerful mind. I got to do that myself. That's a personal responsibility. So yeah, no, I think this is a great group for that, because I personally can hold both. And it was that guy at Burger King, you know, he was a really smart kid. I think he was like maybe 13 or 14. No, he's working with me. He had to be 16. So he's 16 years old, and he's already graduating high school. You know, he was about 3 grades ahead, and he was, you know, he was probably going to go into college as a junior, not as a freshman. Really smart kid. And when he said that, I can't remember if he said like the wisest or the smartest, I can't remember the wording exactly, but he said that they can hold 2 contextual opposites and have them both valued as reality. I'm paraphrasing because that's not how he said it. And I was like, that's fucking stupid. Like, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Like, how can you have 2 opposites and both be valid? Like, it's either up or it's down. Like, what the hell are you talking? And then it's like, well, is it up? Is it down? What's relative? You know? And I'm like, okay, that's so yeah. You know, I think through this practice, through the things that we're doing, we are actually seeing that there's no difference. We can marry these two together, this esoteric and this, what's the opposite of esoteric? Very, you know, this is a mouse and this is this is matter and atom.
Practical maybe.
Literal.
Yeah, literal. Yeah, literal. Yeah. So we can take these two and we can put them together, and if we have peace, we can interact with them both harmoniously. That's again the contextual opposites that we can combine together, and it harmonizes. It creates a feeling of balance. And that's kind of what I was recommending with the tricks of attention. You know, as you're going throughout your day, balance the contextual opposites, and then you can have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. When they come together, it's a really, really valuable feeling that can come from that kind of balance.
I have a perfect example of that.
Sure.
And it's often a difficult conversation between my brother and I. You do it much better than I do. He accepts it from you much better than he does from me. So usually I'm talking the woo woo and he's talking the yeah, but devil's advocate thing. And I am not often successful at finding the bridge to make the point with him. But that has to do with our place in our family, and just there's a lot of momentum there built in with who we are in, or who we see each other as, but which has changed over the years. We were taking a ferry ride to or from here when I was looking for apartments, and certainly the ferry ride and the view was conducive to peacefulness. So we were having, and he was going through some medical stuff. He's been for a while, and we happened to pass an area that he had flown an aircraft when he was flying and landed. I think there's an airport right over here, and he was recalling the flying. So flying became the catalyst for us to be able to talk about this stuff, because there's a lot of literal, practical things that you have to do to fly an aircraft by yourself. He was by himself in his recollection of this flight or similar flights in the area. And how long the runway was and what you had to do to land on it and things like that, which I find very interesting. Our dad worked for Grumman and built aircraft, was involved in the building of fighter jets and the lunar module and things like that. So we have a common interest in flying and planes, I think, because of that. And we both worked in Grumman as young people during our between college semesters. So anyway, he was talking about the logistics of it, and I was asking questions, and it was very interesting to me. And then he was talking about the feeling of flying and how he misses it, and when he had his plane crash and then flew afterwards, how it was different for him because he had this memory of the and he recognized the things that disrupted his peace that he felt when flying. So he could maintain all of these practical things. You don't lose it when you're flying. It's like driving. When you're driving, you don't forget how to brake and how to stop at the light, but you can certainly be conscious of other things at the same time, if driving is peaceful to you. But flying was very peaceful, out of the practical experience for him. He was able to touch something in him that he didn't get normally from the distractions of everyday life. And so we were able to have a conversation. I'm not going to go into any more detail, but I recognized that when my thinking got in the way, how it disrupted the peace of the virtue of flying that I was able to achieve beforehand. And then it became a mental thing for him to want to transcend that. Like, I know what's happening. It's my own mind getting in the way of my peace that's happening. And he was weighing whether it was worth getting out there flying to get rid of that and to overcome that, as opposed to just continuing to come to class and do it there. But it was only accessible in his understanding through the flying experience. So there were those two things existing at one time, is what I'm trying to point out, which it can be very hard to explain to someone who has a lot of momentum going in the practical. That imagination and the feeling is something that's very real and contributes to your peace, and you can access that without having to recreate the circumstances. You can access that because you know the feeling of it. So I just wanted to bring that up because it illustrates everything you're just talking about.
Yeah, and so that is a great segue into what is really deliberate modulation. Deliberate modulation is a part of the hydrostasy, or the spirit aspect of the practice, that you're not changing anything really, because you're peaceful, you're calm, you're cool, you're collected. It's like, well, what do I want to do right now? Well, I might as well be this or that or the other thing. That's what deliberate modulation is. But there was a requisite for that to be what I'm talking about, and that was the mind has to be relaxed in order for us to utilize the mind being relaxed. Does that make sense? So here's a quick rundown. Tai Chi mind. So I have thoughts running through my head that are repetitive, habitual, and not making me feel well. I don't want to be, and this is a Tai Chi thing, and you'll see all the relationship to it. And it's like, oh my gosh, I see where Ernest came up with all this shit. I organized it. I didn't invent it. I just found a way to organize it that some people will find this digestible. Some people will find this beneficial. Some people will be like, this is the most stupid shit I've ever heard. And they'll go do Anthony Robbins' personal power program and benefit. Fine, that's okay. There's more than one ways to, I'm not going to skin cats. There's more than one way to float a boat, so we could do that. So Tai Chi mind this is running through my mind. How am I going to do this? How am I going to fix this? How am I going to create this? I'm trying to figure it out. I'm putting people in boxes. I'm compartmentalizing. I'm labeling. I'm judging. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm doing all of these things with my mind. So to allow that to continue is a form of passivity. That passivity is unbeneficial. It will lead It will take emotions and drive them, make them 100 times worse than they were just a moment ago, and it will reinforce the closed feedback loop. The mind will create more emotion and energy response. That energy response will now influence the thought. The thought will continue to influence the energy response, and then before you know it, we have created the mood of suffering. So in Tai Chi, I'm not going to just let Gene punch me in the face. That's passive. That's not going to benefit me. And I can tell myself that everything is working out for me all I want. He is still punching me in the face, and it's not working out for me. This entire dynamic of getting punched in the mouth is the epitome of not working out for me right now. So I can't just do that. I can't just think positive because Gene is punching me in the face. No, that's still passivity. Okay, so we have passivity, but I'm also not going to use force. I'm not going to try to no thought it. You know, I'm not going to, I can't expect to go from 500 miles an hour of anguish and psychological suffering to, you know what, I'm just going to zen out real quick. Now, I could go to my yoga class and I could create a little bit of space, but if I don't do anything with that space, which is the embodiment that we do, it's not going to last. I don't know how many people who are 200-hour, 500-hour, 1,000-hour yoga masters, and they're up and down, left and right. You know, there's still a wild amount of psychological suffering. And I'm keeping that incredibly general because I don't want to judge, you know, but it's just, I can't help but notice that sometimes these masters are not taking it into their everyday life experience. They're still benefiting, you know, there's probably still really cool people and they got lots to, we're talking about something a little bit different. We're talking about the embodiment of peace, the embodiment of creative energy and conscious creation. Okay, so I'm not going to use energy to try to push thought away. Similarly, if Gene is trying to punch me in the face, I'm not just going to grab his fist in midair and then you can't punch me anymore. Well, maybe I could do that. However, it required a lot of energy on my part. And if Gene is stronger than me, which in this example, the thoughts are stronger than you, otherwise they wouldn't be running rampantly in the first place. The mind wouldn't have gotten to 500 miles an hour if it wasn't stronger in that moment. I'm not saying that it's stronger than you in any absolute term, but in a relative sense, that thought stream's strong. It's got a lot of energy behind it. So if I do use force, if I go into my Zen state, how long can I do that for before it uses so much of my own energy that I can no longer maintain it? So that doesn't work really either. You know, we've seen that in the world. We've seen where people use force, they try to control, and then they end up believing their own hustles. And now they're gurus and they're, you know, masters of the universe. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe not. That's my devil's advocate. I have a strong devil's advocate, and you'll see that in and this is really exciting, but I have anthropomorphized my own devil's advocate, and it's a person that I talk to. But I think that maybe is one of the reasons, and I'm kind of going on a tangent, so I'll get back to the streamline of thought, but I think that could be one reason why Gene and Donna can come to this space so easily, and we can share it and learn and communicate. Because like Donna, I do get into woo-woo. I really do believe that these things are 100% possible. However, I also have a very, you know, analytical, very, well, Ernest, floating and levitating is awesome, but you're pissed off half the time. So what are you going to do with levitating? You're probably going to hurt people. You're going to become a villain, and you don't want to do that. So, you know, I got the devil's advocate there too. I'm not just going to go off into left field and live there. I'm going to balance. Okay, so we know that passivity to this unproductive stream of thought is not really going to work. We know that using force isn't going to last, so that's not really going to work. What do we do with streams of thought that are repetitive, habitual, and not making us feel well when we're trying to compare, we're trying to contrast, we're trying to judge, we're trying to figure it out, we're trying to do all of these things with thought? And it's like, okay, how's that working for you? Well, it's not at all. Okay, keep doing it. That makes sense. It doesn't. Devil's advocate would tell me, Ernest, you've thought this thought 753,000 times. 753,001 isn't going to be the aha that you were looking for. That's logic. That's a very devil's advocate thing for my mind to say. we redirect. In Tai Chi, Gene is trying to punch me in the face. I'm not going to use my energy. He's already issuing it. He has issued more than enough energy. And if he's not practicing, Tai Chi, he's probably imbalanced in that punch. All I'm going to do is correct the imbalance. He is the imbalance in my moment because he's trying to punch me in the face. I'm going to correct that balance with the redirection of energy. Now, in a physical sense, that may end up with Gene in the wall. Hey, don't try to punch me and you won't have to be balanced in my field of circle. So I take that and I apply it to the mind. I'm not going to try to be passive or try to force my thoughts away. I'm also not going to be passive and just allow it. I'm going to redirect. Redirect how? To what? I redirect back to the present moment using words. I think that mantras are beneficial to a certain extent as long as they're logical and you believe it and you feel it. But you can also use the logical voice of power, which is not necessarily the same words in the same order like a mantra, like there is no spoon, there is no spoon, there is no spoon, there is no spoon. That's a mantra. The other aspect of the voice of power is, Ernest, why would you continue to do this? How is this really benefiting you? Maybe you can just go back to the moment, create some space, and let the idea come to you. That's all logic. I'm interrupting the illogical stream of repetitive habitual thought with the voice of logic that I believe. I'm like, you know what? That's true. I do believe that. So I think that relaxing my mind would be the most beneficial thing for me in this moment. I do believe that. And now I'll tell myself that. If you really want to, maybe I'm in a creative situation. If you really want to create, relax your mind, Ernest. That's a sentence. And it's maybe unique to the experience, but it's still the voice of power, if that makes sense. So I'll use the voice of power with other points of attention to redirect the thought stream back to the present moment, to redirect my attention back to where I am, back to presence, back to mindfulness, and back to deliberately intending my point of attention in advance. So ultimately, the redirection is back to the practice. That's what we're redirecting to. And then when that happens, we can take the thought down by degrees. It goes from 500 miles to 400 miles to 300 miles. And then before you know it, we have a little bit of peace that we can embrace. Hopefully we don't start coasting, because then that peace isn't going to last very long. People will do it. People will coast. They'll create the space, they'll feel better, and then they'll stop doing their practice. This practice only works when you do it. It's an embodiment practice. It has to be done as often as you can remember, if even all the time. That would be the ideal, is that we're always engaged in presence, mindfulness, and deliberate attention. And I know in the very beginning, the idea of maintaining deliberate attention can seem, monumentous. It gets easier, just like Edie was saying. It gets more familiar. We can find it faster. And then before you know it, the idea of not being aware of your physicality, I can't even imagine that. I can't even imagine waking up and being so distracted by thought that I don't feel Ernest. I don't feel me. That's gone. I've been doing this for too long that I can't really go back to that and feel comfortable. So I'm not saying that it's automatic. I'm not saying that it doesn't require the degree of attention that I have to give it. It still does. I still have to do it. But not doing it starts to feel terrible. And Donna has touched on that in the past. Not doing my practice now, or if I'm too distracted, or if the thought stream starts to pick up, I feel that right away because I'm so used to paying attention to the moment and how I feel. And I don't want to go down that path. I know what it feels like. I know how terrible and dry and gray and just, it's not as vibrant. It's not as visceral. It's not as exciting. I don't want to do that. I don't want to go. And again, that could be a voice of power thing, right? My voice of power could interject and say, Ernest, you don't want to go back to trying to control. You don't want to go back to trying to figure it out. Create the space, allow the opportunities to come, listen to the affirmations in the world around you, and you'll know what to do when it's time to do it. I think what is occurring with Shen Shen is a great example. I would have an idea and I would just run with it. I have an idea and I would just run with it. And then that dynamic wasn't really working out for me. So I'm like, okay, I'll have an idea and now I'll kind of put that on the burner. We'll kind of let it simmer and like, we'll kind of see how it works out over time. And then before you know it, one thing starts falling into another, and I can fully envision a center of mindfulness and Tai Chi like never before. We're getting closer and closer and closer. And I'm not trying to control. I'm not trying to figure it out. I'm not trying to make it happen. I want it to happen. I can envision it happening. And as long as I create the space and maintain my focus, it's a done deal. Assuming that space junk doesn't fall from the sky and terminate my velocity, it's a done deal. Does that make sense? So I have just outlined what Tai Chi mind is really all about. Tai Chi mind is taking points of attention, such as the golden line. Check in, go back to the present moment, right? Yin and yang. I can see the light. I can see the shadow. I can see the up with the down. I can feel the rise of the crown with the perineum and the dantian going down. I can feel those at the same time. When I was showing Dr. Jia Tai Chi, I was like, you can see that this leg is substantial. This leg is insubstantial. This arm is substantial. This arm is insubstantial. This is substantially pulling up, not pulling, but you know what I mean? It's up. And then the dantian is down. Yin and yang is always balanced in every single motion in our form. In every single motion of our form, we either have Pong, Ji, Lu, or An. You can find it. You can feel it. You can see it. And it's there. So the idea is that Tai Chi mind is the mindfulness practice, but we're using Tai Chi and we're just taking that with us, listening behind us, the expansion of proprioception, listening to sounds, feeling the wind on our skin. All of these different things are still a part of a Tai Chi practice. If Jean was in the park, I would recommend paying attention to the leaves, listening to the sounds that they make while you're there. Feel that gust of wind as it brushes your skin while you're doing your movement. So every single technique that we have ever done fits perfectly into Tai Chi mind. So does that category of the practice make sense?
It makes sense. And there's also an experiential thing that happens as a virtue, and that is the conception of Tai Chi or even Qigong is these small movements, these small points of awareness when we're practicing the physicality seem it's not boot camp. You know, there's not a lot of what it doesn't feel at all like what other exercises that we think or other classes that we think are going to achieve big results are like. And when we just practice for a relatively short amount of time, we can notice that there's more peace, that there's a greater range of motion and less stiffness in our joints. We can notice that our breathing is slower and more deliberate. And what you notice from just committing to an activity that may seem very small, limited in comparison to the other types of exercise classes that are out there, that the results are large, and that it brings a feeling of peace and more fluidity and less bumpiness and less jaggedness. It smooths the edges, and that's also all of those realizations. And it's a relatively simple activity. Doesn't have a lot of rules associated with it. It's just simple attention to different things in your body that connect you to your body, and all those principles apply to the Tai Chi mind as well. It's an activity. It's not passive. It's just points of attention, and when we are doing it, it quiets the mind and brings peace. I mean, it's all directly related. It's not indirect. Yeah. It's direct.
It's directly related. No, I agree. And I had an aha moment, you know, when Joshua Grant, we were in Arizona, and he's like, your body is there because you put it there. The reason your body is there is because your mind is exactly where you want it to be. So the mind and the body are deliberately where they are because you have put them there on purpose. And I'm like, isn't that what I'm doing with my mindfulness? Like, isn't that the same thing? My attention and my mind and my body are exactly where I've put them. And then let's get a little woo woo. Isn't that law of attraction? Everything is exactly where it is because I put it there. My mind is there, my
It's not
energy is
even
there.
about creating things that you don't think really exist or allowing things. It's really, it could be really simple. And I know that if I said this to my other brother, he would go, it was just a coincidence. You just happened to be looking in that direction at the same time. And that's just how he feels.
Maybe, yeah.
But I was about to move. It was the day before the moving trucks were coming. I was physically exhausted, like out of balance, but I'd been practicing, really, really mindful about my practice. And I knew there was going to be some imbalance for a while because there was a lot of just do energy that was required. And I could sustain it. I had to be really particular, impeccable with my practice. I could keep my mind balanced and keep the peace. And soon there would be time for me to relax and not over push my body, and my sleep will be more routine. But I was going to maintain all of that as well as I could while I was doing a lot of physical activity. And the garage door opener broke, and I called him, and he had just gotten off the golf course and said, my garage door opener broke and I have to move tomorrow. They're doing the inspection. He said, oh, I'll come over. He's very good. He has a naturally peaceful mind a lot of the time. And he came over and he was fixing it. And I don't know anything about the garage door opener, which is why I called him. And he was on a crickety ladder and he was doing something. And I had the idea that he was doing something wrong, but what the hell do I know? I'm like, didn't it have to be screwed? And he kept resting the hammer within his reach in a precarious way. And he needed something, screws or something. I was like the assistant. I went to hand them to him. And of course he accidentally brushed against it and the hammer was about to fall on me. And I grabbed it in midair. Now I was exhausted, like that should have hit me in the head, but it didn't. And I grabbed it and I knew the instant that happened was a result of my practice, that I knew that was true because my physical body was really being pushed out of balance with what I was doing, yet I was still able to and I was tired, but I was aware of that and I practiced even more impeccably because of it, as not to get hurt. And I thought that was but that was a perfect example of, I knew it in that second. And I said to him, that's a result of my practice. And he laughs. He loves me. It's like a pat on the head kind of laugh. Yeah, okay, it was a result of your practice. Yeah. But let me just finish fixing this. And then at the end, he said, you know what? If I would have just done it that way, which was the way that I suggested to him in the beginning, it wouldn't have taken this long because I did it wrong. And I knew that was a result of my practice because I was paying attention to my balance. And it's an activity is what I wanted to say, because it's active. And it was just about the balance of my mind. It was just this practice that allowed all of those things. I could see how to fix something that I didn't know anything about. And I could catch the hammer in midair in the midst of my whole life changing and what appeared to be chaos around me. I know that was from the practice. So that's just an example of the Tai Chi, translating Tai Chi mind and Tai Chi activity, translating directly.
And I could literally fill up an hour class with amazing catches. Like how many times I think one of the most amazing, I'll just share it real quick, but we were at a Mexican restaurant and I was tired. We had been walking all day. There was a napkin and it blew off and I did this to catch it. And I just did it instantly. I did it fast. And of course I looked around. I was like, did anybody else just see that? Because that was the reaction. So yeah, that's all a result of practice. Okay, so just to round out real quick before we go. So Tai Chi mind is everything that we've been learning with the mind, Tai Chi body, I'm going to introduce the standing meditation to create structural integrity. It's not the energy aspect of the standing, but first we'll focus on structural integrity. We'll start doing a little bit of form practice, start putting together some of the basic Qigong things that I do, or basic, it's really just breath work. It's just breath with movement. We're not really going to focus on the 14 different channels of the Qi. And I keep things just a little bit more general, just so they're a little bit more accessible to the average person. And then of course, the Tai Chi spirit, that's when we start focusing a little bit more on the breath, the imagination, allowing the piece that we're creating through the other two components. We really start to engage that a little bit more with other techniques, such as mind gazing, such as paying attention to the space that you're physically creating, and things like that. So does that make sense how I've kind of organized it into those three categories, so that it's, I want to make it more digestible to the 3 million people in Chicago that I'll be, that will be, and I don't have to do a lot of advertising because the group is going to, yeah, I mean, that's all just another conversation. That's not
Are
important.
you going to
but yeah.
record it?
Record what?
You
When?
doing it?
No. You mean like in like private sessions type of thing? Or
Oh,
so
you're offering it in private sessions, not in class?
oh no, I'm offering it in one-on-ones, and then the classes are free online. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll have 3
Okay.
classes. Thursday will probably be Tai Chi Mind, since we've been doing group study, and that's kind of when we come for the more psychological aspects of the practice. But soon I'll add a day where we do physical, where I'm going to do some movement. We can do it together. It will focus first probably on just a little bit. Let's just breathe together. Let's just move together. Let's just feel some relaxation, and then let's learn something, and then go back to a little bit of relaxation before we leave, so that we're still benefiting from it. It's not just all instruction, instruction, instruction. But I do want instruction to be there, because I know that it's desired right now. People, you guys want some of this. So, and then the spirit aspect, the Tai Chi spirit, that's when we do start to talk a little bit more about the hydrostasy type of things. Stuff that we're doing with our intention and our imagination and our the feeling aspect of this practice. We really start to engage it and emphasize it and let it grow and let it mature, and it gets thicker and more visceral, and we can feel it even more. So we'll have all 3, because there's a lot of folks in this group, and I think that others who will start to join, who will be it will be very appropriate for them to start asking some of those feeling related questions, because they are. Now, if a person is in severe psychological suffering, I can't talk about spirit right now. Like, I can't. You're not gonna. It's just gonna be talk. It's just gonna be conversation that may be nice, but it's not gonna have any real effect. We have to create the space first to really embrace the spirit aspect of the practice. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so I still love the bridge. I still have it organized. And when I have my PhD, I'll use my street credit to help make that something that's like continuing education for mindfulness-based stress relief and stuff like that. Because that's what they're all about, mindfulness-based stress relief. I'm about embodying mindfulness to completely change the dynamic of the human experience. And also, in my own words, dissolve the 5th destroyer. The only way that we can affect the 5th destroyer is on the individual level. It's not trying to change other people. It's, I have changed myself and the way that I do things, and then that will affect the generational energy that we've created. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just had an idea I have to write down.
Okay, cool. Hurry up, find a pen, don't lose it. All right, so if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to put this particular session into YouTube, and then I'm going to share it with the Shen owner and just kind of give them an idea of what we do here, how classes, in air quotes, classes, how this kind of thing looks. All right. So if you have any questions or anything, just hit me up. I am a little busy. I have a lot of things going on, so yeah. I'm navigating that as well. You didn't find a pen, Donna? Okay, cool. Okay. All right. Well, I will see you guys again soon. I'll have announcements as to when the new classes will begin. So as you can imagine, I'm not on any time scale, so we'll just kind of, it happens when it happens. But let's still plan on Thursday for sure next week. And then moving forward, I'm going to introduce the 2 new classes, which will be Tai Chi Spirit and then the Tai Chi Body. And Tai Chi Body, again, we're going to be doing more physical stuff, so just have a little bit of room to reach. And then Tai Chi Spirit. I think a lot of this group will definitely embrace it. So, all right. Well, I'll see you guys again soon. Thanks for hanging out. Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
You're welcome. See you soon.